Hey, thank you. So welcome. I'm Sue. As Zena said, I head up the innovation team in the Ministry of Justice. My background, I've been in the civil service. I worked out yesterday and I was quite shocked for around 20 years. I've been practicing occupational psychology for most of that, largely in selection and recruitment, but also talent development, culture building, and job satisfaction, all relevant to innovation and building more innovative organisations, which is what I'll talk to you about this morning. A bit of context for Ministry of Justice, or the MOJ as I'll refer to it as. So we're a government department, one of the biggest. So we're responsible for upholding justice and the rule of law. So we oversee the legal system, courts, prisons, probation services, and any other justice related matters. Excuse me. So we work to ensure access to justice. We protect the rights of individuals and maintain that fair and effective legal system in the United Kingdom. We've got a staff base of around 90,000. We're based across the UK. We do have HQ offices, which I'm in today, but more likely in the frontline system, so in those prisons, probation offices. And there is a lot of innovation in justice. Sometimes people have said to me, it's an old creaky system, what are you doing to innovate? But there are a lot of teams here who focus on science, digital, tech and AI to improve our services. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that today. Our Deputy Prime Minister is our minister in charge of the department, and the department is then led by a senior civil servant, the Permanent Secretary. And then my team sit within this system. So we're just a small team of 5, and our remit is to enable innovation across MOJ. We want all our staff to take more innovation forward. So we've looked at the barriers and the culture required to overcome that. So we've put out a variety of different interventions, including the MOJ's first innovation strategy. And our aim is to make innovating smarter, more accessible and easier to do. So I'll take you through some of that today. So a bit of a definition to start off with, because I think that we all probably think about innovation in a slightly different way. But just to clarify that in the civil service, innovation is classed as a process, something that's new and different, and it must deliver value for the public. So the focus of the innovation can be on staff, but with the underlying premise that it will help productivity, efficiency and value of what we deliver on our services. There's a lot of momentum behind innovation in the civil service and in our department. So the Cabinet Secretary, who's the most senior civil servant, reports directly to the Prime Minister, until last year was MOJ's Permanent Secretary. She wrote an email to all civil servants that civil service modernisation needs to embrace your ideas and have innovation at its core. So we know that we need to innovate, and many people want to innovate, but it's the how. So my team are here to enable that innovation, and so we've set about doing that. As I've mentioned, last year we produced the MOJ's first innovation strategy, enabling justice innovation. And it's intended not to just be a framework or a roadmap. It's more of a call to action for everyone across the justice system to embrace new ways of thinking, leverage those cutting edge technologies, and really collaborate across boundaries to drive innovation and deliver best service to people and the communities that we serve. So that leads me on to a bit of a poll. So if you're able to launch that, Zena, that would be fantastic. Just interested to know, does your organisation have a strategy?
The poll should now be live, so we'd ask you to pick one of those. Yes, no, unsure. We'll just leave that live for another 10 seconds for people to participate. Okay.
I'm just going to end the show so that I can see what you're seeing. Sorry, 1 second. Great. Okay. So this is kind of almost as I thought it might be, that the yeses are on 82%, no, 0%, awesome, and unsure, 18%. Fabulous. Okay, I'm just going to reshare my screen. So it's not to say that that a strategy is the be all and the end all of everything. We just were interested to see in government, especially, sometimes we feel like we're a bit behind the curve, but that's not necessarily the case. but we were one of the first departments to actually have an innovation strategy. I'll just skip ahead. Fab. So here's just a bit of an overview of what our strategy is. So we have, and yours may look similar, it'd be interesting to hear any comments or questions at the end. So we have our vision at the top. So this is where we want the strategy to take us. And it is ambitious. So it's a world-leading justice system powered by innovation, delivering better outcomes for all. And then we have our more granular aims underneath this and our guiding principle, which was to make innovating smarter, more accessible, and easier to do, which I'll come back to. And then the strategy sets out some pillars. Each of those are the ones at the bottom. They're a key lever for achieving large-scale innovation, and I'm sure that you will recognise these. So we bunch things into culture and people, technology and data, and partnerships and processes. And we worked across the department to develop the strategy. So it isn't my team's strategy, it's a strategy of innovation for MOJ. But we did kind of reach out across the department, and we made sure that we coalesced everyone who was trying to do something around innovation, people who were really trying to push forward things, push forward the agenda. And so as part of the strategy in the write-up, we called out some of the really great examples of innovation already happening. We also identified the barriers to innovation and how we intend to help teams overcome them. So most of all, we really wanted the strategy to speak to people. We wanted them to see how it's relevant and what it does for them. And we wanted to make it a living document, something that we can go back to and update and refresh. And actually, it's coming up to that time for us now. It's been almost 18 months, I think, since it was released. So it's about time for it to be refreshed now, because as you'll know, the pace of change with innovation is so vast. We've got some really great examples now and things that have really progressed and changed. So the focus on overcoming barriers and then identifying those enablers is something that we purposely did, as that's why many people weren't being more innovative. So across the three pillars, these are some of the barriers we identified and aimed to call out enablers for. So this is kind of what already exists to help people overcome those, but also where we need to put our time and effort next to create something to do that. So I'll take you around our little roadmap, starting off with skills. So this isn't in any kind of order at all. We see these all as affecting different communities differently and at different times. So with skills, we did notice there's a notable gap between having an innovative idea and the practical knowledge needed for successful development and implementation. So without those right skills and expertise, staff might struggle to identify the root cause of the problem they're trying to solve. They might not even realise that they should do that. They might not be able to create new ideas. They might not have those tools available to them to do that. And then assessing the idea's potential value and also evaluating the outcome from a pilot. So that skills gap can really lead to uncertainty about how to do things like building business cases, conducting pilots, measuring outcomes, and then scaling successful innovations as well. So the skills part of it really does have quite a far-reaching impact. Corporate memory as well. So this refers to the challenge of effectively capturing and sharing the knowledge gained from whatever our innovative initiatives are. So we've noticed that innovations often arise in isolated pockets within the organisation, and that leaves other teams unaware of what's going on and what developments have been made. And that lack of a shared understanding can have really important downstream consequences. Things like duplicated efforts, missed opportunities to learn from previous successes and challenges, and then additional time spent on things as well, because there might be a process or a contract in place already which can be used rather than setting one up of your own. And a lack of corporate memory really does hinder progress. Risk appetite, I'm sure this one will be familiar to many of you. At times, that risk appetite or low risk appetite represents a significant barrier to our vision of widespread innovation. The accountabilities of government often lead to a low tolerance for failure. In MOJ, that's especially true. We do have to consider and take very seriously any unintended consequences. Some of the results of that could lead to things like errors in prison releases, errors or slowed justice decisions, and even life and death when we think about the vulnerability of victims, witnesses, people in prison. So although we do have to take that very seriously, it can stifle the support and adoption of innovative ideas, especially if we want things to happen quickly. So we want to make sure that people recognise that the path to innovation is rarely linear or without setbacks, and we need to have that willingness to take measured risks and learn intelligent failures in order to drive innovation. And then that low risk appetite can have really challenging knock-on consequences for innovators. It limits their ability to access necessary funding, resources, time, permission to pilot new ideas. Often we'll find with something that's new and untested, there's additional governance, additional checks and balances, and then that tests the perseverance of innovators. But also it can mean that time can run out. So we have quite strict funding windows within government. We also have different governance rules around when suppliers can work with us. So time can literally run out, meaning that if funding even is available, then it's not able to be spent in time. And it also sends quite an important cultural message if ideas are restricted before they even get off the ground. Because it constrains people's psychological safety at that point. And then in the future, they might think, well, I might not even bother raising an idea. So we really need to be careful about the risk appetite, that it's set at the right level. Innovation architecture. So what we mean by this is things like insufficient funding, process, resources. So whether that's staff or the right procurement process, something like that. The right kind of things that are needed to nurture and scale innovative ideas from conception to implementation. So that limits the ability of staff to pilot new ideas and to rapidly scale anything that's successful across the justice sector. Architecture then goes a bit beyond that and also includes how the processes are joined up. So whether you have to create different business cases for different purposes, whether timelines and permissions match. So for finance teams, digital approvals, whether you can get technical support when needed, and if commercial will support you in a timely way. In government, these are all, especially in a big department like ours, these are all things that really can have an impact because they are separate teams that need to work together, and often there's a bit of a lag. You do often need guidelines as well. When you're doing something differently, those guidelines might not exist, and that can become a blocker because then people don't know the next step to take. And then that risk appetite comes in. People are worried about taking a bit of a chance on something. When it works well, the processes can align, and they do align, but there can be things where people who don't quite have the skills yet, so they might not have been through the innovation process before. So if they go to commercial before going to technical assurance or digital approval, then they'll have to retrace their steps, and that loses time. So this is something that we've found can be a real barrier within our world. Incentives is next up then. So without these clear incentives, the process of innovating can be viewed as like going out on a limb, being a bit of a thankless task that you do as a passion project rather than a valued way of enhancing public services. And that can shape the perception that in some circumstances, maintaining that status quo is preferable to pursuing new solutions. And we don't necessarily mean monetary reward for being innovative. Obviously, funds are quite tight within the civil service. It could just be having a different award system, so some kind of recognition, really powerful for driving innovation. And what we've done in this space, it's not enough yet, but we have made sure that employee reward and recognition schemes mention innovative thinking as an example of why someone would be deserving of an award. Having something more meaningful, like a larger award, like we do have organisational MOJ awards, that's often more subtle, the way that innovation is represented. And we want to make that more overt and kind of really pull that out. Because at the moment, nominees rarely are innovation related, so we'd really like to shift the dial on that. And then the last one that we can see here is time, space, and permission to innovate. So against this backdrop of really high workload, high operational demands, our operational frontline is understandably really focused on service delivery. We then have a very pressured corporate HQ who also say that lack of time is one of the biggest blockers to innovation. Because of those pressures, support for innovation is not yet excuse me, fully embedded into our ways of working. Sometimes that permission can be implicit. So our senior leaders will always praise when something new is implemented that might improve things, but where risk appetite for potential failures is low, or where the day job and high demands still need to be met, innovation is seen as a nice to have. So people don't feel they can actually take a step back and think more broadly or take time to implement something different in practice. So that's also in the context of a culture where change is viewed quite skeptically. So as time is so constrained, once people have learned the process for something, they're quite reticent to relearn something else, as it would take them more time in the short term, even if in the long term their lives would be easier. So it does kind of really show how in government it is quite pressured. A lot of different organisations and private sector may well have the same challenges and the same barriers. So on that note, I'd be interested to know which barrier you see most in your day-to-day. We've got a bit of a list. Zena, I wonder if I could call on you to report back, because it would avoid me having to stop sharing my screen.
Absolutely. So hopefully you can all see the poll that might have popped up on your screen. It is a multiple choice poll now. So we are looking for you to highlight whether it's risk appetite, that time, space, business as usual, whether it's a permission issue, could be skills and confidence, the process itself maybe not being there. Is it something to do with corporate memory that Sue had highlighted, lack of incentives, potentially resources generally to actually get things implemented? So we've got a few people that have participated so far. So I'll just leave that open for another few seconds for anyone who wants to participate, and then I shall share those results. Okay, so end poll, share results. So hopefully most of you can see that. Resources seem to be the biggest barrier, coming up at 50%. Then we've got things like process, permission and empowerment, having the time and space in next around that 25% mark. Risk appetite, skills and confidence, again, next kind of barrier around 17%. And then that lack of incentives, the corporate memory, bringing up kind of the rear around 8%, but really a scattering, to be fair, across all those barriers that you highlighted, Sue.
Great, thank you, Zena. Yeah, really interesting to kind of hear how you're all kind of experiencing the barriers. And I'd be interested to know if what you're doing about it is similar to our approach. So I'll go into a little bit about how, like, the work that we've done to help overcome barriers. So I mentioned this tagline was part of our strategy. So make innovating smarter, more accessible and easier to do. And I'll just run through a few examples of the things that are within that. So from the top, so actually start with more accessible, the barrier of resources, which is very kind of alive for a lot of you, it seems. So we do have a fund. So my team design and deliver that. It's just a small seed fund of £1 million, offers grants to teams who develop a proposal to show how their idea addresses a problem in their area and has a return on investment through improvements in efficiency or productivity. It's open to all, regardless of hierarchy, role or experience, and it's the team's remit then to take that idea forward and to complete a short evaluation at the end of the period. We also have a community of practice, which my team run, and that's intended to overcome the barrier of corporate memory and skills. And it's really here to join people together so they can learn from each other, share experiences, know what's worked, what hasn't, and to form networks. If we go down to smarter, on the left there, so going anti-clockwise. So our digital teams have worked cross government to develop something that's called a reuse library, looking at the barriers of, again, corporate memory and skills. There's a portal open on gov.uk, the government's website, where people can go to see if someone has solved their problem already, or to share their own solutions, a bit like a swap shop. And so with that theme of reuse, we're running a hackathon in the autumn to bring people together to see what problems they can solve by reusing something that's already been done before or is in development already. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that runs, because obviously we're working with digital doing it, but it's not always digital solutions, coding, software. It can also be things like we've been contacted by the sustainability team to say that this is something that's quite close to their hearts. So they are going to come and mentor on the day. The next one down. So my team's also deep in the trialing stage of developing an innovation maturity tool, which will be a set of questions which can uncover how mature your team's approach to innovation is. And then we would work with the team to build an action plan for improvement. And then once we have that baseline, the intention is that we would go back in after about a year, 18 months, retest and see how things have improved and what steps need to be taken next. And then if we look at easier to do, so if you know how to do things, it's easier. So this is why we're focused on capability building for much of our offer. So whether that's bespoke or targeted or materials online which people can use at that point of demand, they're there to give people the skills and confidence to innovate. And then access to the latest AI tools safely and responsibly. So the Justice AI plan includes responsible use of AI. As a public sector department, we need to ensure we safeguard information, but also make sure that we're making the most of these tools that are available to us and use them to the best of their abilities. That includes things like safety, fairness, independence, and user-centered design. All of those things are included in the Justice AI plan. So that's just a snapshot there of things that are within the strategy that help to address some of those barriers. So we didn't just rely on information about the barriers to create our plan of interventions. And I just wanted to touch on this, and this is some of my bias with the occupational psychology, but many of the innovations that we talk about are technological in nature, but we do have to come back to the fact that innovation is all about humans. So we want to understand, how can we support humans in our system to innovate? How can we create the conditions for them to do this? And underpinning much of our work is this model, so the COMBI model, which you might have heard of. So it's a behavioural change framework using elements from psychology and behavioural science. And it's an acronym that describes the levers that you need to pull to result in a change of behaviours. So with capability, are they able to do it? Do they have the skills, knowledge and physical ability to do the behaviours we need them to do? So equipping people with the skills and knowledge can close the gap in people feeling they shouldn't start something new because they don't know how. And that includes using AI. Again, going anti-clockwise, do they have the opportunity to innovate? So in public sector, often this is, and it sounds like for your organisations, this is access to resources or having an environment or the processes that support them to do it. So here the fund is an example of giving people an opportunity to innovate. And then motivation. So we know this refers generally to a person's conscious or unconscious desire or drive to engage in the behaviour. So do they want to do it? Where they can see and appreciate that need, then they're more likely to want to do it. But also that need to belong. The social psychology is very relevant here, as it's a very powerful driver of behaviour. So where people hear of successful stories, either in internal comms and marketing or in something like a community of practice, where they see their peers being innovative and where they see the outcomes of innovation, removing these barriers from their everyday, that can really motivate people to get involved. So using the model and the source reference there, we followed a process of identifying the target behaviours required for innovation, and also stipulated things like who needs to demonstrate the behaviours and how. And we did need to be specific on those behaviours. And we split them out into senior leaders, all staff, what kind of things we expected them to do to see innovation. And then you have to think about the most feasible and viable behaviours to address first, considering the barriers that are going to get in the way, which behaviours will be most impactful, and thinking about the whole system that you're working in, and then identify interventions that might work and mapping them through a behaviour change wheel, which is the source reference there on the left. So, as well as sharing some of the interventions that we've introduced here, I also wanted to share some of the wider innovation that MOJ has become known for, and also some stuff that might fly under the radar. So within the strategy, we identified and called out the wider impact on the economy that innovation in the MOJ has had and how this could continue to scale. So I've just picked out a couple of case studies to share with you. And the first on the left here is around LawTech UK. So LawTech UK, it's actually an MOJ-backed initiative, and it's dedicated to driving digital transformation in the legal sector. So the LawTech UK programme, backed by the MOJ, and it's just had a funding boost from government for the next 3 years. The UK's legal services sector is a hidden superpower of the economy. It generates more than £43 billion a year and employs more than 317,000 people across the country. 44% of all European law tech startups are based in the UK, so it is known to be a hub for innovation. And there's also the wider social benefit, as LawTech UK supports development of technology to increase access to legal services and to reduce that unmet legal need. I've included a bit of a quote from their chair, Christina Blacklaw's, on the screen there. So she describes it as a vital and unique platform for discussion, innovation, thought leadership and growth, bringing together the leaders from government, investment and academic circles and the legal sector, driving the future of UK legal services and access to law. And then another area of success with wider implications is progress in AI. So this lovely picture here was our Deputy Prime Minister and Secretary of State for Justice, David Lammy, speaking at OpenAI's Frontiers conference last October. And he talked about Justice Transcribe, which I'll go over in a moment. But he also revealed that OpenAI, so the company responsible for ChatGPT, plans to expand its British AI offer for businesses that want their data stored in the UK. So the plan, secured through OpenAI's ongoing partnership with the MOJ, will see the company store data on British soil for the first time. So that will help UK businesses host data securely while boosting innovation, economic growth and our national resilience. And it all fits into the government's plan for change. So in terms of generative AI tools that MOJ staff have available to them, there's a limited number of licenses for an enterprise version of ChatGPT and of Copilot. And everyone also has access to Copilot Chat, which is a slightly reduced version, but again is enterprise, so it can use all the information that we have on our systems. And there's also a lot of internal development using AI. So one of the successes that I just want to touch on is Justice Transcribe. And it's used in the probation service, built by our very own leading AI engineers. So it records and transcribes probation officers' conversations with offenders automatically. It sounds very simple, but it cuts hours of work to transfer handwritten meeting notes into digital systems. And it's one of those examples of a really simple innovation, but when scaled, it can have a really huge impact. Because when you scale it, writing up notes takes hours. And that's time that officers aren't spending building trust, assessing risk, and making those really important decisions, such as whether to recall someone to prison or how to support somebody best so that they don't offend again. So Justice Transcribe, I've got a few stats here that are fairly up to date. So it cuts the time spent on writing up notes by more than 70%. Between 7th of October 2025 and 2nd of June this year, over 800,000 meetings have been summarised, and that has saved over 100,000 hours. And that supports the wider justice probation programme aim of reducing probation officer workload. And it's not just kind of the reduction in admin time. 96% of probation officers have reported improved note quality, and 83% have reported deeper conversations with service users because they're less distracted and they're focusing more on the individual. And those people who use it, as we know, you can implement an innovation, but you need people to actually trust it and use it. It has been used in over 80% of meetings for those who have it, which is a great marker of trust. And they've also had great feedback as well on people, the user engagement. So 4.7 out of 5 is the average rating that it's achieved. And some of the quotes that people have said that it's been described as a game changer that everyone should have, and that it's left them with much more time to do rehabilitation work, and even as life-changing. So that tool, the Justice Transcribe tool, it's now being scaled to courts and prison. And the next stage in development is to bring it into translation as well, as many people in prison don't have English as a first language and they struggle to communicate. So that can affect everything from their psychological well-being to their legal cases. There are human translators, obviously, that we use at the moment, but having AI to do that would mean that it's a lot quicker, there aren't delays, and it would be cheaper as well. It can also be used to reduce court backlogs and prepare decisions and case documents more quickly. So the evidence is still early stage, but we can see the potential of it to improve access to justice for all. So those two examples are about AI and tech, and they can provide us with some of the attention-grabbing headlines. But I will bring you back just to the way that we've embedded innovation in the team and engaged people in it is by accounting for the way that people really work and will respond to change, and helping to design interventions to help them move past barriers to innovation. And that is it from me. That QR code there, if you scan it, you'll be able to connect with me on LinkedIn. But for now, are there any questions? I'll hand back to Zena.
Thank you. So, does anyone have any questions for Sue? We've got a couple of minutes to take a couple. Either do enter them into chat, or if you'd like to come off mute and ask. Whilst people are kind of digesting everything you said, and it was fantastic, Sue. So, thank you for sharing. It was great to see that you'd highlighted the barriers and then some of the kind of areas or solutions in a way that you'd use to overcome the barriers, such as the community of practice, the reuse library, which I loved, by the way, the online masterclasses, the innovation funds, etc. Do you think one of those, if we think of the 80-20 rule where, 20% of the things make the biggest difference, which one of those kind of solutions do you feel is really, I know it's a collective approach, but has really made the biggest difference to getting more people involved and to building that culture of innovation?
I'd probably say the fund, because people get excited when there's money available, but also it helps people to really get embedded within the process of innovating, so they actually get to feel it and experience it for themselves. And it also means that when you create a little bit of buzz, a little bit of excitement, people get that feeling of they want to be involved, they want to find out more. And then that kind of creates that social element of wanting to feel like I want to be part of this group that get excited about innovation. And it does kind of create its own little ecosystem of, right, we're going to create a blog that's about the fund. We're going to go and have a bit of a trip out to see one of the pilots, and maybe the senior leader wants to get involved. So yeah, I think that sometimes it's less about the actual money involved. It's more about the after effects and kind of the knock-on effects of people feeling that they've seen their idea come to life, and they've learned a bit about the innovation process. They've seen that it can work, and then they tell other people. And then that kind of creates this contagion effect of people talking about innovation and wanting to be involved. So I think the fund has had a lot of impact, but not necessarily for the reasons that we thought it might be.
No, thank you for that. Have we got any questions coming into the chat? Not yet. one last question for me, unless you've got anything else that comes in. You kind of referenced your psychology background and you kind of almost talked about change process and what behaviors you were looking at. I think a lot of people come into innovation not necessarily with that background from maybe a more scientific or a technology perspective. So, how do you feel kind of your background in, I guess, having greater understanding of the psychology of individuals has helped to really, again, develop that culture, the behaviors, etc., that you're after?
Yeah, I think I definitely do have a different perspective to some things, but I think that a lot of people are getting onto that now. So um, I think it's if you are part of an AI team or an innovation team, you're probably aware that culture is really important. But for people, perhaps the tech or the digital specialists who develop something, they might not understand why aren't people using this the way it's intended, or why aren't they even using it at all? Like there's this great thing there that they can just pick up and use. And it is more than that. And it's a lot of different disciplines do come into it as well. Kind of user-centered design, service design is very much about making sure that it actually addresses people's needs. But when you take into account people's behaviours, their motivation, their different drives to belong and to really feel as though they can trust, it really does kind of shape things. And thinking about psychological safety as well, I think when our team first started kind of driving forward the principles of psychological safety for innovation, it was quite new. Um, and it's kind of understanding that you can't just plonk a psychological safety workshop into a team and suddenly they'll be innovative. It's understanding that that's a process as well. And you need to build psychological safety first and then kind of pick it up for innovation. And then that's kind of really driving that high performance at that stage. So it's kind of pitching it at the right level and not just kind of giving a blanket approach to everybody. It's understanding that there are going to be individual differences along the way.
Oh, thank you so much. So we haven't had any questions come in, so it was clearly, really clearly explained, and I think it was a great way to kind of cover that concept as well, looking at barriers and solutions and outcomes too. So great to see those strong outcomes that you're already having and continue to have in the future as well. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences, Sue. For those of you, just a reminder that the Idea of the Year competition does close on the 3rd of July. So do get your entries in now. And also, hopefully, you can join us on the 7th of July when our next InnoHive session is due. It's all about hyper connected yet underbonded. How does that affect continuous improvement? So we can pretty much get hold of each other 24/7 these days. But do we really talk? Do we really communicate? And do we really innovate together still? So we've got Lindsay McLean, the transformation lead within one of the sections of our National Health Service. So it'll be health focused, talking about that alongside actually a bit of me too. So we'll look forward to seeing you all on the 7th of July. And thank you again, Sue, for today's session. Much appreciated. Hope to see you all soon. Thanks very much.